time for Nerdy for 30, the summer of X-Men. My name is Kevin Bauer, a.k.a. Critics' Choice. With me, as always, it's the people's champ, Tim Keck.
Yeah, baby.
And today, we are proud to be covering, analyzing, gushing over the movie Logan, the 2017 Wolverine standalone hit that proved maybe you can make a good Wolverine movie.
This is like a real movie. This is a film that's with X-Men themes, and it's a bummer we haven't gotten more like this, really. This is a very fun trend. I mean, we get the Joker, which is just like shit, but this is very clearly a Wolverine movie. This is comic book characters. It's a little crazy. It's like cloning. It's weird, but it's so good. All the characters in this are very complex. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of emotions going on. The group dynamics are interesting. The way they interact with other people. All the themes we've talked about in the other X-Men movies. You know, being part of a marginalized group, being made to feel less than, and then also, I guess, the threat of mutants to society in some degree of not having control over your impact on the world around you all the time. This is a banger. I have one obvious beef that I mentioned on this before that I think is a little dumb, but the rest of the movie in general it's great. It's so good. I'd say almost no notes other than the obvious flaw of the clone Wolverine at the end. But what do you think, Kevin? Where do you stand in this? How does it stack up against what we've been watching so far?
You know, I gotta say, this is a little slower than I remember it being. I think that's because we have now, in the past, 7 years at this point from when this movie came out, we have now been given a little bit meatier stuff to work with on the nerd front. But at the time this came out, this was like the first steak we'd ever been served after like a lifetime of ground beef, when we were just happy to be trying meat. Like it was awesome. I saw this. I remember the night I saw this on the Friday night that it came out. I did a double feature of this and Get Out. And I remember walking out. I saw Logan first. I remember walking out of Logan to meet up with the friends I was going to see Get Out with. And they were like, how was it? And I was like, boy, it's going to be tough for Get Out to top what I just saw. And I mean, it did. But this is still like, I mean, this is definitely in the upper echelon of superhero movies. If for no other reason than the dynamic that we get between Patrick Stewart and Hugh Jackman, like that Charles Xavier and Wolverine relationship is so deep. You really believe that these people have had all these ups and downs with each other over the course of decades. And there's so much love there, and there's so much resentment. And that parental relationship is totally flipped in a way that happens to everybody as they get older. And it's really interesting to see a superhero movie exploring those kinds of themes, because what other superhero movie can you think of that has ever done that?
I don't know. I mean, I think to some degree this could work. Well, I mean, there's obvious fun parts of this, but I mean, a lot of the emotional character work can be done without being X-Men, you know, like it's a dad finding out he has a daughter and his grandpa's sick and they're trying to do what's best for her. He doesn't really want anything to do with her. He never asked for her. He didn't know about her, and essentially becoming a reluctant hero again after having, you know, already done his time and served his country or whatever mute kind for so long. Mm-hmm. I think all of that can translate to another movie, no problem.
Well, I think the complaint about this, or that people would lodge, is that it's kind of shoehorning this sort of a thing into a superhero story, or vice versa. Like shoehorning this into a superhero story to make it seem more mature. But I think after the relationship that people had for 17 years with the X-Men as a franchise, and with Wolverine and Professor X specifically, both of whom are household names, it's interesting to take cinema icons like that and run them through the ringer of this sort of relationship.
Yes, it really is. it's a drastic tonal shift from what we've seen with both of these guys kind of the whole time. I think it makes sense for their characters. I think this is like it's a sad projection. It is also this movie is sad. This is a depressing movie. There's hope at the end, I guess, but we're watching our heroes die, and we're living in a world where there is no happy ending for the X-Men. You know, we got that in Days of Future Past, right? I was looking into the timeline a little bit, trying to figure out how it goes.
Godspeed.
And if these other movies happen or not. And from the most I have been able to figure out is that we kind of have the first movie, X-Men, X2, X3. Then we do Days of Future Past, which essentially retcons 2 and 3. So they don't really happen. And Wolverine is now in this alternate timeline. He's greeted at the end of that movie with Professor Xavier saying, "Oh, you finally made it back. I have so much to share with you." And I feel like in that moment, you can really feel a connection between Professor Xavier and Wolverine. And from there, time passes, and then we get Logan, which is dark and mysterious. And we've already seen the dynamic evolve further to Professor Xavier being, you know, a crotchety old person who is getting sicker and mentally ill. And it sounds like he has like Alzheimer's and seizures. And, you know, and he has this son figure that is trying to figure out what to do with this guy who is dangerous to himself and everyone around him. It's crazy. And I think Professor Xavier in this is an ass. I think he's an asshole. I think he's selfish. He comes across as just like a selfish, crotchety old man who, you know, is putting his needs above the greater good, but also he's like at the end of his life and is like, fuck it, you know, I deserve a night. I deserve a nice night. You know, I don't care if I jeopardize the lives of the people in this scenario. I deserve a good meal. I deserve a nice night. But then also at the end, realizing that maybe I actually don't deserve this thing. And, you know, that is kind of the weird struggle we get as we get older, too, I think, or at least older generations is, you know, I feel like our generation always has to deal with the entitlement of older generations, just how they have to deal with I don't know what we do, but it just felt like a very real relationship to me.
I think,
I think we want to hold everybody accountable. And it seems like Professor Xavier has done awful shit. And he also thinks he deserves to be treated well and have a good, you know, and there's a disconnect there. There's a disconnect with Professor Xavier where he feels like he can do bad stuff and get away with it. And he's just a spoiled rich kid, you know, to some degree. Doesn't mean he's a terrible person, but he is a very flawed human being. And I think that's interesting and like a good progression of his character. You know, what do you think of like Professor X and Logan, and how do they track with what we've kind of been dealing with those characters so far?
You know, it is interesting because if you were to say early in the X-Men movie timeline and early into like the X-Men comics timeline that Professor X is doing some of this entitled stuff, it would seem contradictory to his character. But we're talking about a guy who is in his 90s, as he says, who has been around for a really long time, did a lot of stuff. I mean, Professor X is a guy who did a lot of good, but definitely knows that he did a lot of good. You know what I mean? Like, this is a guy who feels entitled to things because of the stuff that he's doing to help. So it tracks to me that guy would get to the end of his life and be like, oh, fuck it. I helped so many people. Come on. I want to go buy a hat. Like, let me out of the house. I want to see the sun today. Do you know how many people I lodged for free at my school? Let me go see the sunlight. Like, he would just start throwing that stuff in your face because the walls kind of come down. I definitely think that tracks. It's interesting to me, the disparity between Professor X being a person whose his mutant powers, his mutant abilities make him so much of a threat in this movie that to a certain extent it breaks the mapping between this and a normal situation where somebody is just aging, because there are things that that apply to Professor X in this movie being such a threat to others that just simply don't apply to like my grandparents or my great aunt or like any of the people that aged and died in my life. Because like I would never use this language for like my great aunt that passed away last year, but like Professor X isn't useful anymore. Like he is like, he's at a point where he can use his powers to connect with people, but those powers pose such a threat that he's basically like anti-useful. Like he's an active threat to society. So he has to be locked away. And yet he wants to live. Meanwhile, Logan is somebody that is still like helpful. He's still going out of his way to help people. He still stands the ability to help a lot of people. And yet he doesn't want to live anymore. So they're at like very opposite points. They make an X, if you will, as characters where like they're in complete opposition. And yet there's that love for each other. And so neither one of them can leverage this fully on the other person.
Yeah. No disrespect to your aunt, but I think if any of us live long enough, we do eventually become a burden as opposed to a thing that provides service, to be really blunt and crass about it, you know? Like, yeah, I remember having my parents had to have discussions with my grandparents about driving, you know, and my grandma. Yeah.
I mean, that's a big one, dude.
RIP. She wanted the car. She's like, I want the car. I want to be able to go places. And it's like, if you drive, you could kill people.
Yeah.
She's like, I don't see why that thing. I don't see why that factors into this. She's like, that's the analogy. So we're both talking about. She's like, oh yeah, and I have a goldfish. So we're both just talking about shit that doesn't matter. What is this? I need a car.
Oh my god, that is the analogy, isn't it?
But that is the analogy.
It's Professor X driving.
Yeah. It's Professor X driving. I mean, but this happens to all of us. And also, at some point in your lives, I mean, hopefully you live long. Everyone lives long enough to go through this, I guess. You got to take the keys away from someone who wiped your ass as a kid.
Yeah.
You know, oh, I put you through college. I put a roof over your head. I fed you every day. And of course, there's going to be entitlement there. You know, when we get older, we're probably going to feel entitled, you know, if we have kids or whatever, and help them grow up. You know, I've been here for you your entire life. You got to be here for me. But also, you know, that is a sense of entitlement, but it's also a very human emotion and understandable, I think.
Yeah. Oh, man.
So,
yeah,
I don't think Professor X is wrong. He's clearly he's not doing what's right. I understand why he's doing what he's doing. Mm-hmm. It makes sense to me from that perspective, but he is taking very selfish actions in this. Yeah. And he has complete disregard to the way anyone else is living or has to interact with him. I love the scene where Wolverine's like, you know, what'd you do? What happened back there? And he's like, I did what I had to do to save Laura. And Wolverine's like, you had a fucking seizure. like, you didn't have any control over that. You think you did this great thing? Like, this was handed to you. You know, you got so lucky. And you think you earned this, you know? Like, how did Professor X leave that scenario and see himself as the hero? That's fascinating, but that is also like old people behavior, you know?
Dude, it would be, and to hold the analogy, it would be as though Professor X was driving a car, fell asleep, and just happened to steer the car directly into a rampaging bear.
Yeah, he crushes a bear before it mauls someone. And he's like, I'm done. I've done here today. You're welcome. And then leaves. You know?
Oh, man.
Like he T-bones a car, you know, with like a couple in it, and the husband dies, but it turns out he was abusive. It's like that kind of, you know, like where he's like, you're welcome. I've done all and then just pulls his cape around his shoulders and flies off, or rolls off in his case. But it's crazy. He's wild. And Hugh Jackman makes a ton of sense. We've always talked about how he does well with like a young protege. Mm-hmm. X-23, one of my favorite characters. I don't necessarily think this is my favorite version of this character necessarily. I mean, I like her more when she's older and can speak.
Sure.
But I was going back and rereading like old X-23 comics, and like kind of the introduction of her character in the comics is like as a child prostitute, like living on the streets and being abused by people and doing, kinky cutting stuff to get by and working for a pimp until she eventually stabs him and then, joins the X-Men and does like covert assassination missions. But she like can't talk at that point, and she's kind of like has to learn her humanity and capture things. And I'm pretty sure they're trying to wreck on the prostitute stuff now. But
yeah,
there is a point where she is adjusting to being in society and doesn't talk and doesn't know what to do and is wide-eyed. And I think this actress does like an awesome job of capturing that and kind of relating to them. Do you think, I think this is part of this is just suspending disbelief, and it's like the way this is supposed to be. But like she calls Hugh Jackman, or she calls Wolverine dad at the end, or daddy.
Didn't like that. Just not.
It's a little far, right?
Yeah, it's a little, and I mean, it's very textual. There's no subtext to it. If she hadn't said that, we would know what she was thinking already. Yeah. But then she goes so far as to actually elucidate it, and it's like, this is a little much. Just like when they pick up the cross at the end and tilt it to the side to make it an X. If it had started as an X, awesome. I'd be like, that's sick. The fact that they picked up a cross, turned it to the side, I was like, come on.
What if the cross just fell over when they walked away?
I think that's even a little cute for the end of this movie, where like
I think it's cute, yeah, but I don't know. Also, why is she turning it into an X?
Sure.
What is her relationship to Wolverine and the X? Or is she just like, well, I had comic books of him. I mean, somebody's holding an X-Men, like a Wolverine action figure in this. Yeah,
it's the astonishing X-Men Wolverine.
It's crazy. And they have the comics in this, and they're talking about coordinates in that. And the line does seem kind of blurry, and it feels like they're trying to make this even more real by acknowledging that this media has been created, inspired by things that, were then taken out of proportion and all of that and glamorized, probably.
Sure. And I mean, like, to her, he is more so even, I think, than a father figure before she even meets him or necessarily knows. I don't know the extent to which she knows or when she finds out, but he is a hero to her because of those comics. And I think to all of those kids who seemed like they had those comics as contraband and really believed in what they were seeing there and believed in the larger than life version of Wolverine, they believe in Wolverine as society is going to remember him. Whereas Wolverine, in fighting this younger version of himself, only sees the darkness of his youth, which is interesting. Like he rejects their image of him because it's completely at odds with who he thinks he is. Meanwhile, he means so much. And I was going to bring that up. It's interesting to me that this movie and the first X-Men movie both take very clear stabs at comic book media in general. Like the first movie has that line of like, what did you expect? Yellow spandex. And then this movie has Wolverine holding an X-Men comic and being like, you believe this shit? This is bedtime stories for bedwetters or whatever. And
right.
I mean, they're two of the best X-Men movies though, but it's interesting to me that they are the ones that have come out the hardest against like comic bookness.
But they're also, like, we never get the yellow costume.
Sure.
We never get the 90s costumes. We never get the cartoon costumes. They're in jumpsuits, and I think at the time that was in the 2000s, that was kind of contemporary. And that's kind of where like they were correcting, I guess, where how flamboyant stuff was.
Mm-hmm.
But they never really leaned into that, where I would argue, the MCU has had the opportunity to lean into like their more flamboyant characters. I mean, people have capes and bright colors, and Captain America, like kind of the more authentic the costume is, the more fun it is to watch. And it still kind of works because they're wearing a costume. They're trying to inspire people, like it does kind of work in story to some degree. And it's interesting that they're just so interested in rejecting the comic idea and that whole side of things. I don't know.
You can trace some of that back even to the names. The fact that the X-Men movies, and I think to a large extent the early MCU movies too, really grounded everything out by relying a lot more on the people's names than their code names. Because it's very different if you're having a conversation and someone says like, Logan, come on, versus Wolverine, come on. Like it reads as phony in the latter.
Yeah. But I mean, they pull it off in Avengers, you know? I guess,
True.
well, I guess, no, you're right. They do. Well, they do use Tony and all this stuff as much as possible, but in the field, it's Cap, you know?
Sure.
Thor's is his name, I guess. I don't know. I think it kind of works out. So one of my biggest beefs with this movie, which really turned me off the first time I saw it, probably to an extent that overshadowed how good this actually is. And on the rewatch, I didn't hate it as much, but I do think it's lazy to have Wolverine fighting a younger clone of himself. I think it's just kind of unoriginal. I'm sure it's happened in the comics. It's like a mindless robot version of him, but it's younger and in shape. And I think you can do that with a different kind of clone. You could do, Dakin and just make him like a weird. But there's been so many different versions of Wolverine and different clones of him. You could easily make another one. You could bring back Lee Shriver and have him play like a weird, give Sabretooth adamantium and send him after him, Yeah. Like something like that. But maybe the symbolism of him battling himself is just, they clearly wanted that over everything. Even though I've argued too that all of his villains are versions of himself, they're all metal, they're all slicing stuff. He fights, the woman with the claws, with the adamantium claws.
Deathstrike.
He fights Sabretooth. He fights isn't there somebody in the third one? I guess not, but he has these antagonists
Spike guy
that are versions of him. What?
Spike guy? He's going toe to toe in the X-Men The Last Stand.
Yeah.
Spike guy.
Spike guy even has these like stabby things. I mean, he meets multiple people who can heal. That is, I think there's just a version of that. You do Omega Red, you do whoever. You could invent a guy, and I don't know. Where do you stand on that? It doesn't seem like him battling this character is actually that big of a part of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they kind of downplay it to like kind of restrict it to the action scenes, and it's more about the people using this clone as opposed to the clone itself. We aren't asking ourselves a lot of morality questions around his clone. I'm not wondering what his clone's thinking. Does his clone want to be here? Any of that stuff. It's just, this is a weapon that some guys with motivations turned on to hunt Wolverine. It's not any more complicated than that.
Yeah.
So I think that does kind of take this beef down a notch, but what do you think? Do you think this is a problem at all? Or do you like it?
I didn't hate it. I definitely didn't hate it, but it does seem like a missed opportunity to do something a little more original. I understand why it's there. Like I said before, he's literally, he's a younger version of Wolverine that wears black. Like it's his dark past. There's that.
Yeah.
And
it's also old man Hugh Jackman.
Yeah. Man.
Age down.
Yeah, it's a little tough. Dakin would have been cool. I do think with no history. It's been a long time though. So you could explain, Wolverine has a son that he wasn't there to take care of. And the son followed exactly in his dad's footsteps and became a soldier despite his dad because it was everything his dad ever tried to keep him from. Like that kind of thing. I think that's interesting in its own way.
Or you just throw that name on a clone.
Yeah, sure. That's what I thought this was when I first saw it. I was like, oh my God, here we go. We got him. And then 3 claws came out and I was like, oh.
It's X-24. Okay.
Yeah.
What's X-20? It's just kind of, I don't know. That's kind of a bummer. I do feel like, I'm also wrong on this, but there is something about Wolverine where like every time we get Wolverine, the way to make his character more complex is to take away his healing factor and then like to take away his claws. And like they just want to take away all these things from him when his power isn't necessarily that extraordinary anyway.
Sure.
But I kind of want to like see him do that stuff. And this movie, on rewatch, there's definitely a lot more Wolverine action than I remembered. He's definitely like clawing people in the face, which is awesome. X-23 does a lot of ass kicking. Like there is like top-notch violence in this, and it's awesome and it's very fun. But there is also some part of me watching this movie is like, God, I wish Wolverine was healthy. Yeah. Like the whole time I'm like, God, I wish he was healthy. I wish he was strong. And you kind of get that at the end when he like juices, and like hypes himself up, which is really fun. But it's just a taste, they just give you a taste and then it's over. And it's like kind of a bummer to me that we watched like sick, weak Logan this whole time. Yeah, I don't know. And also because it seems like, I know this doesn't make sense for the story, I guess, that they're trying to tell, but it seems like if Magneto ripped the metal out of him, he'd be fine again, right?
I mean, yeah, maybe. It's interesting because I think that's half of what Deadpool and Wolverine is trying to course correct, is the fact that when we did finally get this R-rated Wolverine movie, which is something that people have been begging for so long, like it's easy to forget that this was the first one where they took the kid gloves off. That opening fight scene, that's my biggest thief, because it let you know immediately. As soon as he saw the claw inside of the guy's screaming mouth, it was like, holy shit, they're doing it on this one.
Yes.
So then the fact that we had sick, slower Wolverine, I think was the big caveat for everybody of like, they finally gave us one and there were some pretty cool fight scenes, but he definitely wasn't his best. This isn't the X2 fight scene, but with blood. Like, if the X2 fight scene hadn't been in the shadows and they could have been able to show anything they wanted to, that's the Wolverine fight scene people wanted. So it seems like that's specifically what they're going out of their way to do in Deadpool. I keep wanting to say Deadpool versus Wolverine, but Deadpool and Wolverine.
I hope so. I hope we get that. It seems like that's the vibe. The fact that we're getting a yellow suit is, I think, a step in the right direction. Like, I kind of want just want kick-ass Wolverine in an R-rated movie, you know, that's sweet. But yeah, I don't know. The rest of the movie's great. I mean, hanging out with everybody is cool. The relationships between all these people, Caliban's pretty interesting. I don't know if I care too much about the people chasing him. I don't know if that did anything for me. It's weird that they kind of have all these allusions to Essex Corp during like the X-Men kind of movies we've seen so far, but then I don't even know what this other company is that they're chasing them. Did that ring a bell to you, or was that?
No, I think it may have been name checked in the comics at some point. There are so many different corporations. I'm trying to remember if it's from either Ultimate X-Men or like the new X-Men run, because I knew there were in the new X-Men run, there was something called the Y-Men, where it was these people doing genetic experimentation. That was all pretty gross and grisly. But I think it was slightly different. It seems like pre-Disney acquisition, they really had a different course in mind. And it seems like they were really trying to build to something, because there was a mention of Essex Corp, I think at the end of X-Men Apocalypse too, right? I don't even think it's Dark Phoenix. Yes. I think there's one where like, we didn't know we were getting Dark Phoenix because of that Essex Corp thing. So they were aiming toward it, and maybe we'll still get there at some point, but who knows when.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Oh yeah. And then also how dark did you think this movie was? Because there is, and rereading like X-23 comics, like when she first shows up, she's like hurting herself. There's like self-harm in this. There's comics where she just like throws herself off the top of a building just to like feel something. And I think that is incredibly dark and messed up, and also incredibly compelling to like, introduce a character and take advantage of her powers in a way that also shows how damaged she is. And Laura cuts herself in this. The kid unalives himself off a building. They have all the stuff with the kids getting herded up. I think I teared up a little bit on the rewatch. I was like, oh, this is a lot.
Oh, this is tough, dude.
This is really tough to deal with. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely going in. That's kind of what I wanted to bring up too, which is the fact that this is the first one of these movies we've talked about in a long time. And like, we've been recording these pods over the course of a while, but like, I think it's been like 6 weeks since we talked about allegories for some sort of social commentary in an X-Men movie. And this one feels very directly related to conversations about like border control and immigration policies. And it's 2017. So I think the movie would have been hitting right around the same time that we were seeing more frequently in the news stories of what the administration was doing with like putting kids in cages and shit. And I mean, it's just like, it's brutal to see. It's one of those things where, again, we talk about sugar pilling this kind of a thing. And it is the kind of thing where if you see it happening in an X-Men movie where you aren't necessarily expecting to see that, if you're the kind of person that shies away from reading about that kind of information and from politics in general, this could be the thing that kind of Trojan horses into your life.
Yeah. 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 I mean, this one definitely is a lot more loaded than it seems like, you know, the Wolverine was or X-Men Origins.
I don't think there's anything in the Wolverine.
No, there's no depth there. There's no nothing. Yeah, I don't know. Did they ever get Wolverine right as a character?
I think
do you think
so.
We've kind of gotten it indirectly, or do you think there's like a movie where they just 100% nail it?
I think this is probably the closest. I think this is the closest that they got to really doing it.
Is it better than X-Men?
At depicting Wolverine? Maybe not. The first X-Men really does the damn thing. Like,
yeah, it's really good. But the other Wolverine movies, I'm like, they're like the X-Men, aside from the first one and X2, even maybe in those, they just feel like a real tease.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like I've been edging this whole time. And there's like,
I mean, you haven't?
There's just a, and there's just a way to like, I can't really put my finger on it, but like, there's a way to just crush this in a satisfying way. And since the first X-Men movie, I don't really think they've been able to do that. You know, even Logan, it's got like the old man element of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, it's kind of, Logan's kind of unsatisfying too, in a weird way, even though it is like, you know, the most respectable movie of the bunch. Yeah. When am I gonna nut?
I mean, I think in July, dude. I think in Deadpool and Wolverine, because I'm thinking, I mean, there's that scene at the beginning of the Wolverine where he's hunting down the guy that hunted down the bear, but he's in full like Grizzly Adams at that point. Like that's not really, it's like, it's Wolverine personality wise, but in terms of like the character, it's still like a weird variation on him. It's kind of like, it is him when he's been like living out in the woods to reconnect with nature. But I'm thinking about that episode of like X-Men, the animated series, where he goes up to Alaska and like, that's fucking Wolverine, dude. That's Wolverine right there.
He's in his costume the whole time and he's just like fishing with the locals. It's like,
Sabretooth tries to bomb them off a bridge. That's a great episode. Yeah, I don't know. I'm really hoping that Deadpool and Wolverine brings it all home. I had a question for you about the dystopia presented in this movie, because I do think that this is one of the most realistic dystopias that we've seen. It's driverless semis and, you know, ads that are kind of 3D and people still being assholes when they call an Uber or call like a limousine service. How do you think the evil villain's plan, we haven't really talked about Richard E. Grant of Loki fame at all, but how do you think his plan of very simple genetic restructuring laced in processed foods relates to a larger X-Men allegory? Do you think that this is like another thing they're trying to tackle? Do you think that this is like social justice related at all? Or do you think this is just like a very plausible evil villain way to get rid of the mutants?
I mean, this is stuff our government does, right? Like, why are we all eating corn syrup? Why is corn syrup and everything? It's like, oh, because the government has an agreement with farmers and farmers are making corn and somebody paid them the right amount, and now we're all getting fat off corn syrup. Like sometimes it works in the positive. We get fluoride in the water, and fluoride's good for us or whatever it is. But like we're guinea pigs. They're just. I forget what it was exactly. Was watching something where we were talking about the CIA and how they just used to go into bars and just drug people.
What the fuck?
Like with LSD and stuff, they just like go to like do all these experiments on people in like 70s and 80s. They've definitely done like they like dropped gas on people. Like, I mean, our government, there are systemic. If we really want to go off these rails, this movie is talking about a systemic effort to put down mutant kind. And I think that kind of stuff happens in real life all the time. There's lots of tiny systemic problems that over time play out into huge problems that drastically affect us in the world we're in. So yeah, I think it like maps perfectly. It also we go to the farm and they have a meal and it's nice and everything's cool. The only people living in dystopia are Wolverine and Professor X. Then they go to a hotel and it's nice. They go get things. It's nice. I mean, he's going to junkyards and stuff, but the rest of the world's moving on, And I think that's incredibly accurate too, is like, I don't know, at what point do things get to a point where it's actually dystopia is when people aren't comfortable anymore,
Yeah.
And everyone else is comfortable except for the mutants, it seems like. So, and I think that's accurate for today too.
Damn. Yeah, you really brought that home for me. It's not about what I think. It's what about the listener thinks. What do you think, listeners? Send us an email, nerdy430@gmail.com. We'll read it on the show. You can also comment on YouTube or drop a note in the little poll thing on Spotify. I think we've gotten one note on one of those ever. People don't know this feature exists, but it's there every time, and we'll see it. Thank you so much for listening, everybody.
Sweet.
We are going to be back here with Deadpool next. We are on to the pools leading up to the big release next week. It's going to be a blast.
Deadpool will be more fun.
Yeah, I think so. Less heavy.
Also, there's not a lot of symbolism in that. That one's just a riot. We got guests coming up.
I think when we dig into it, you might see a little bit more symbolism than you thought.
Oh, yeah. We can find a way to make it boring, but we'll find a way to bum people out for sure.
And that's our promise to you, the listeners, here on the Summer of X-Men. Bye.
Bye.